All right, great. Darren, are we ready to get started too?
We are.
All right, wonderful. Yeah, so I'm happy to facilitate if you'll just share the slides with so that people can see. All right, so welcome everyone, members, staff, and the viewing public to our first meeting of the Student Experience and Engagement Committee. I'm going to go through our meeting agenda and the introduction and focus of our committee, and then we will jump into some of the work that we will be doing today. So for our meeting agenda for today, we are going to go over the introduction and the focus of our committee. Our general goal is to identify 2 topics that we can focus on and think through the work for our work plan. If we feel and get to 3 topics and we need to table this and take it to the working session or continue additional conversations, we can. But hopefully we can get some clarity around 2 topics that we'd like to move forward with after our meeting today. We'll move into some work planning, identifying how that work can look before determining when and how often we would like to meet. And we'll end with any questions or next steps between now and the working session. Does anyone have any questions or comments about the agenda? All right, so to keep us moving right along, just to ground us in the purpose of the work of this committee, the Student Engagement and Experience Committee is responsible for researching, advocating, and analyzing policies for recommendations to improve how students in DC experience school, out of school time, and opportunities that impact their engagement and learning. Our committee will engage with community members, educators, students, and family voices to better understand these topics and to identify policies that would positively impact this area. The committee's work will help strengthen students' voices by hosting expert panels, organizing public engagement events, drafting resolutions, publishing research reports, and more. All right. Any any questions or comments about the purview or focus of our work together?
Rock and roll.
Let's keep it moving. Great. So we're going to jump into a brainstorm here on overarching topic areas. This is not going to be where we're going to choose areas to focus on, but really just based on what we've heard from our constituents or know that is going on right now in the DC education landscape. Brainstorm the main topics of categories that fall under our areas of work. But before we do that, Jen, I want to turn things over to you to kind of give us an update on some of the work that you've been doing.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Williams. Good afternoon, members. I just wanted to share briefly, knowing that this committee, likely chronic absenteeism, seeing this on the slide here, that I believe this was Director Butler's idea, but it's been just floating around over the past several days that since there are multiple pieces of legislation being introduced in council, and now that we have passed our state board resolution on truancy and chronic absenteeism, that we should create a crosswalk. It would be similar, but obviously not a carbon copy of the one that we produced on teacher retention. So that's the idea. Director Butler also had the idea to at least meet with and collaborate as much as possible with Chairman Mendelson's office and their staff around at least like what would the framing look like, how at all, if at all, we can collaborate on this resource. And so I wanted to share that with you all before you discuss your topic areas, letting you know that this is in the works. Director Butler and I are meeting with their Chairman Mendelson's staff again later this week to kind of iron out what this will look like. So I don't have many details yet, but I wanted to share with you, let you know that as the C committee, I and we will of course be getting your input as this is being drafted. And I believe the goal is to complete this by around mid-June when they'll be starting to have the hearings. So I'll stop there. Again, I may not be able to answer questions, but does anyone have any questions?
I have one kind of comment and then a question, Jen. So tomorrow, just as a reminder, the citywide Everyday Counts Task Force is meeting, and I'll be attending that. And they're also looking to finalize some recommendations for the city around truancy and chronic absenteeism in June. So I think that timing is actually really good. In terms of the crosswalk per se, like I know that, you know, and for the public, the state board just completed our resolution on this topic. And I know that Representative Parker has a bill or proposed bill on addressing attendance issues across the city. Are there any other particular bills or any other things that you know will be potentially included in the crosswalk? Just so that we know kind of what we're comparing and what the context is.
Yeah, my understanding is that including Councilmember Parker's, that there are 4 pieces of legislation. So it would be those 4 along with our resolution, knowing that when we were a main purpose of our resolution was so that we weren't, you know, reinventing the wheel or being duplicative of many of these pieces of legislation. So essentially, one similar to the idea of the teacher retention crosswalk is just laying it all out there. Like, where are there any gaps? Where do these documents align? Things like that. So does that answer your question, Representative Williams?
It does. That's helpful to kind of know that there's multiple bills that have already been proposed.
And again, I will share, I'm spending my week kind of diving into those bills, and we'll share the titles and numbers of those as well with you all.
Thank you.
And Jen, I'm also thinking, are there any, like, is there any adjacent work that might need to be included in the crosswalk? For instance, who was the group that just did something related to safety? And I think they pinged points related to chronic absenteeism in their report. I can't remember who did that, but that's something to think about. And then I guess my question is, and it's not like a right now question, but like we have a crosswalk and then what? Which is usually my question whenever we decide to start doing reports.
Yeah, and again, I do think, at least in the initial conversation with Chairman Mendelson's office, it was just to have a resource for, you know, when the hearings happen, when all of the legislation is being discussed and considered on a deeper level, that we as state board staff and members, council staff, and members as well, have all the information in one place about the content of everything. So I from my perspective, I think that's kind of again, similar with teacher retention, it was like, there are these 3 documents that are all about the same thing, but again, where do they align? Are there any gaps? If so, where are they? So to inform decision makers, but also help chart a path forward.
Gotcha. And then I think did the Office of Student Advocate, did they do a report just not on safety, but like on a general state of the school, state of not schools. They usually do like a student survey and then they generate a report. But I can't remember if that was a this year or a previous year thing. But that might be
Aaron,
another.
does that ring a bell to you?
Say that again.
Yeah, I could speak a little bit to that. One, I know it's mentioned in their annual reports, just like I think the absenteeism and truancy topic comes up. In terms of sole report that focuses on that, let me mark that as an action item, so I can, Carlene, what you're saying kind of rings a bell. I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
But
I know there was a safety report from like the Deputy Mayor of Education and like that, because was it one of the initial bills, was it the one that Councilmember Parker, I think, created a committee to do the report, and they have a report. And then I imagine their report has recommendations, and then usually Dan's office does something related to student surveys. And I went out with him to schools, but I can't remember what exactly. They were collecting data from students. I can't remember what those data were. But he probably has some recommendations because they were talking about, like, does transportation impact your ability to get to school? Does safety, if you don't have a safe passage work on your street, like, does that impact your ability to get to school? And he was collecting information on those questions.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I'm going on the website now. That's the thing. Can I follow up with you on that
Sure.
after
Yeah,
that?
it could be they're not done yet too. But I just remember there. I'm just thinking about all the things that are happening around this issue.
Yes.
Because I'll imagine with all the things, I don't foresee gaps. I foresee
Yeah.
work.
And you're right.
But it's good to see it. It's good to see it. So
And
Exactly.
the Deputy Mayor of Education's safety recommendations report, Dan, as you know, Dan was sitting on that. It does touch on that as well. So I could pull those resources, share them with this committee, and loop Jen in as well as she works on the crosswalk.
One of the biggest problems we had was with the teacher retention report and survey was there wasn't any result from everything that we did. The DCPS and the bothers me or scares me is that we have an emergency situation as far as truancy and attendance. And the council goes on summer break, and then schools go on summer break. It would seem to me that there needs to be some kind of immediacy, that there's a plan in place on the first day of school with consequences for students who don't come to school right away. All right. The problem with the attendance figures, they don't come out until October. And that's when they start counting enrollment and stuff like that in October. By then, we've already lost almost 2 months of school where students haven't necessarily come. I think it needs to be I don't know what we can do, to be honest with you, except raise the flag about there needs to be some kind of change in how students are made to come to school, or convinced that school is important, or some other mild word that takes care of it. But the thing that bothers me the most is that there's nothing going on at the beginning of school to hold students and parents accountable for their students being in the school every day.
Yes, so I appreciate your urgency there, Representative O'Leary, and I think, Jen, if that would be one thing that I also share is just like wondering, I think the start of the school year is a good time to really think collaboratively about what plan is in place. I'm wondering if that when you and Director Butler meet with Chairman Mendelson, if you could kind of ask about the timeline of that and just share that certain members have expressed a desire to be able to do something and continue to work on this in the summer so that like there's a thoughtful approach once school starts.
Well,
But
remember, I'm not on that meeting anymore. I don't
yeah,
think.
and we could share that out at the working session too. I mean, part of that is this is just kind of jumping into the work that we're doing right now. So I think for me, the thing about the crosswalk that I would want to plan and just be clear on as we work on it as a board, similar to like the teacher retention stuff, is it's nice to kind of to see like what different pieces are moving and how they connect. But I'd also like for us to use this as an opportunity to make specific recommendations. So when those bills are actually being considered, we're not just saying, this is what our resolution was, this is what these bills say, but that we can continue to have those conversations. So if there are new strategies that we'd like to see implemented when the council is taking this up, that we can effectively weigh in and speak together on that.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you all for your points and questions, and I will take them all again with me to the meeting later this week, as well as we continue to collaborate on this internally and with Chairman Mendelson's team and staff as well.
Thank you. And Darren, can you reshare your screen so if it's not already, so that we can brainstorm topics together? Are others able to see the PowerPoint slide? There we go. All right, so what we're gonna do right now, just for some moments, is just brainstorm subtopics so that we can see all the areas that fall under these broader categories in our committee topics. So it's like 4:20 right now. I'm hoping that we can maybe do this in like 10 minutes. But we have student safety and mental health, out of school time, facilities, chronic absenteeism, and then opportunities for learning. So we're just gonna go in order and brainstorm topics so that we can kind of see all the things that might be relevant for us to potentially tackle. So for student safety and mental health, what subtopics come up for folks?
Are we talking about student mental health?
Student mental health. Yes,
We
because I
need to
feel like
have-
the educated mental health would fall more in the committee that you're chairing.
Right. I think that we need to have a psychiatrist or a psychologist in every secondary school,
Okay,
at least.
so school psychologist.
You know,
I also think,
I'm a proponent of restorative justice, which I think the system seems to have neglected,
mhm.
and they're not utilizing that program if it's done correctly, which speaks to, because this student safety speaks to everything else, if you think about it. I mean, there are a lot of kids that don't come to school because they don't feel safe.
So
I
that
mean,
was one of the things that I was gonna name too, is just like safe passage. And
Yeah.
like taking stock of where we're at with safe passage. Um, and then to your point there around psychologists, like I'm wondering if we can also look at, I know there's a shortage of new certified social workers and school psychologists, but if we can look at how we can increase the pipeline of mental health professionals so that, you know, students can receive care or have more adults at their school. I know that like the caseloads are very high in some places and students don't feel like they're able to get the time and attention that they need.
Let me ask you a personal question about your particular school. The counselors at the high schools are not really counselors. They're doing too much record keeping on, you know, SAT scores and all this other academic kinds of things. I mean, they're not counseling. They're not counselors don't come out of college with a counseling degree to talk about academics. It's more about how to deal with the child's brain and what's going on in the child. They don't get a chance to really counsel. And we know as teachers that we are counselors too. But
Mhm.
I'm just wondering if there's how is it at your school?
Well, I think the distinction I would make that is relevant at Capital City and some other places too is just like the college counselors versus like the mental health counselors. So we do have a team of 3 professionals who are the college counselors, a director, and then 2 associates. And then and they just focus, you know, on making sure that students have a plan post-secondary after they graduate.
Right, right.
And then we have the thing that to me would also be important right now in the budget cycle is our mental health counselors. We partner with Mary Center. So And I've heard that that funding, you know, is at stake for schools to be able to contract with additional local community-based organizations. So that's a huge concern for me, because oftentimes, like, the school counselor that we pay on staff, because we have one school counselor for the entire high school, she might be busy, but the licensed social worker from Mary Center is in the building every day, and she's able to see students who might be having a crisis or might need to consider meeting with her.
And that's what, I know at Cardozo, we didn't have a counselor. We had counselors, but we didn't have anybody that wasn't overburdened with academic work or paperwork or whatever, that had nothing to do with, I know I'm just finishing up my semester at UDC, and I don't think it's because I've overworked them, but I've had at least 5 students in 2 classes who have just been telling me that they're going through so much at home that it
Right.
affects their work. And I'm only talking about like 40 kids.
Right.
And they're adults. I mean, they're over
Yeah.
18.
The need is high. Are there any other topics that come up to you, Representative Reed or Representative Villaflor, for the student safety and mental health piece?
Yes, but I don't know how to frame it.
What are you thinking?
So I'm just gonna throw out, like, how are we looking at our discipline process? And we can figure out whatever words that go there. Um,
What are you seeing as the connection?
Student safety. And I will also say that will connect with teacher safety. Some of the issues that the WTU have previously raised about just the behavior, some of the behavior management or behavior issues or things that are going on in the buildings that just were making environments unsafe for a lot of people. And that was fresh off of visiting a high school today. Where, you know, seeing a situation about to escalate, I'm not sure if it did. I kept moving, but yeah, it's something that we can't skirt around. And it's developmentally appropriate for students to have structure in place and processing, you know, feelings and their actions in a structured manner. But, you know, in a balanced way. But I think we can't neglect that and talk about mental health and student safety.
Got it. Yeah, that's important. Representative Villaflor, and then Darren, we able to promote Representative Goulet? Because I think he joined in, but he's not a panelist right now. Representative Villaflor, do you have
Yeah,
anything to add
so-
to this topic area?
Uh, I was thinking like the social emotional learning things that we're talking about and how it's meant to be kind of like proactive on like it's supposed to be like proactive on like conflict within schools. And I was thinking about like school like culture, I guess. Maybe things around like bullying and those kinds of conflicts.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I know that in some of the work we did, like even in Ward 1 and then also at our school, Capital City, like there aren't necessarily like teacher trainings around bullying, like and then some of the policies, particularly around LGBTQ students, like for the district haven't been updated. Like so that might be a piece that we could focus on as well. That feels important. I think the thing that comes up for me when you say SEL standards is also looking at the bill, the conflict resolution bill from Councilmember Louis George, and seeing how it's going to be implemented. Because that might be a good place to push on that OSSI can be responsive to, given that that's moving forward. All right, Representative Goulet, welcome. Just to kind of fill you in where we're at. We went through the introduction of the committee. You have the slides there. And our main goal today is to kind of identify, similar to how we were talking about in our previous committee, two issue areas that we can focus our work. Jen gave an update from the state board that we are going to be doing a crosswalk around the chronic absenteeism, given that there are multiple bills throughout the city that are currently being proposed. Just so you have that context. And right now we are brainstorming subtopics around these issue areas before we move forward with trying to prioritize which ones we want to tackle in the near future.
Well, thank you for the update there. I can't turn my video on yet. I think the host still has it disabled, and apologies for being late. I got called away to an emergency here. So if you can just let me show my smiling face here, I'd appreciate it.
Eric, I gave you co-host permission.
There we go.
There you go.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, and Representative Goulet, do you have any other subtopics to add to the student safety and mental health category?
No, I'm thrilled to see the ones that we have. The out of school time was the important one for me, and that's on the list. So I'm really glad to see it there. So thank you.
Great. So that's actually a good segue. So moving into out of school time, and Darren, just want to flag for you that Representative Reed put something in the chat too. What subtopics come up for you, Representative Goulet, that you think would be important for us to explore?
But with the out of school time, I think the thing that's important with this is, first of all, understanding what's in the mayor's budget right now, whether that's going to maintain or allow us to expand capacity with out of school time. I would love to see this targeted specifically at schools where we've seen either chronic absenteeism or violence. So it could be schools or neighborhoods, because obviously with our unique setup we have here, depending on how they arrange programming, we could do it a number of ways. And then the one thing I would really like to do is then reach out to students and find out what they really want to see with programming, get an idea from them of what they think is working, and then what needs to be changed to make it something that there would be a program that would better meet their needs. So those would be my thoughts on this. I would like to try to understand more of what the mayor has in the budget for out of school time. It's obviously there's a number of moving parts with it kind of spread around, but it appears like it's not being cut, but it doesn't also look like it's getting any expansions. So would love to get other people's feedback on it, but this has been a priority for me, and I'd like to, that's why I wanted to be on this committee. So I appreciate you including it on the list of topic areas.
Definitely. And then can others just feel free to kind of jump in if you have other subtopics for the out of school time category?
Quality control, or how we explore quality in out of school time environment. I know I had a couple parents who have an interesting experience with their out of school time provider for a 3-year-old, where the solution was to suspend a 3-year-old. When it's like they don't understand suspension. And some other just interesting practices. So I'm just curious, what are the out of school opportunities around the city? I would love a crosswalk of who gets what and what offerings and what providers and those kind of training, that kind of thing. Is it this one, are there certain parts or schools that have more specific opportunities, or they're kind of a catch-all? Like, what does out of school time look like in our city? And where are the opportunities located, and what type of opportunities, and then who is facilitating those opportunities? Maybe not, but just a visual for that, because I know we have some good out of school time providers, and then I fielding a couple of the emails that I filled, kind of like, what's going on here? And making sure that our out of school time providers are well trained, well compensated to provide the best services that they can, and not just bodies in an after school setting, but really, provide those enrichment activities.
Yeah, that brought to mind what I was thinking of too, Representative Reed, which is just like I don't know if audit is the right word, but just like taking stock of what we are providing, to help parents make informed choices, to see where we need to support certain places and just knowing what exists and before we can even get to the quality control, right? Like knowing what's being provided. Representative.
Can I jump in there really quickly? Just a reminder,
Yep.
our May public meeting is on out of school time, so we will have panelists. I've reached out to a few. Riley Denalco from DC Action said she is interested. And I just realized that. I don't know if I could say that publicly, but she reached out and said she was interested. I reached out to a few others, but these are great questions as well to raise with them that then could be brought back to the committee.
Great. So I want to honor our time and keep us moving along, but before we do, Representative Villaflor or O'Leary, any other subtopics for out of school time?
I'm wondering what has happened to out of school time once we run out of all this extra money that we had, the ESSER money.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know a lot of schools jumped into that, and there were a lot of, especially teachers and people that worked in the building that were being paid for working after school, but I don't know exactly what was going on while that was going on. And now that we don't have that money, and the mayor's saying we don't have any money, I'm wondering where out of school time is going now.
Right. Got it. And that's similar to what we were talking about with getting stock of things. Representative Villaflor?
I don't think I have anything to like add, but kind of just to emphasize like quality control and just like making sure the people who are running the out of school time programs are like properly compensated. Because at least in my experience with like after school clubs and things like that, it's definitely like noticeable when there's a lack of when a teacher is like spread too, or when a person is spread too thin or not like properly compensated when they're managing the.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on to facilities. Any core facilities issues that come up for people right now?
I mean, on this one, Representative Williams, I'm deeply concerned about kind of the lack of even really a completion of the phase one modernizations that we have for some of the schools. And the boundary study in MFP did not seem to tackle those challenges, in really any way that was important, particularly on the area of students with disabilities. Like they're like trying to find inclusive space in our facilities that meets the needs of those students. I don't think has been achieved. And then lastly, I mean, it's an issue that's unique to several schools, but the issue of overcrowding in our facilities is a very real problem. And that's not been addressed at all in the MFP, not a bit. So those would be my concerns with facilities.
Thanks.
And then obviously health and safety, I would fit in there with the phase one. So if there's, health or safety issues that have developed since that time, we obviously want to address those as a priority.
Yeah, I would also, with regards to the sequence of the modernizations, I've heard that a couple schools like weren't included on the original list of the modernizations, but they should have been. So I know like Roosevelt Stay, and the Garnett Patterson facility for their, is due for a modernization, but it hasn't been as prioritized as urgently. So I'm also wondering if we could just kind of look at where things sit with that and see what schools are next and what schools need to be prioritized. Other issues that come up for people.
I don't really like just something the flag, I guess, is like vandalism. At least I know in like in Capital City, there's been, at least what I've heard, there's been like a spike, or there's been a lot of like destruction of school property recently, and it definitely affects the quality of just like things that students need to use everyday like bathrooms and like walking down the hallway with like broken exit signs and things like that, it doesn't really make it makes it like a burden from the school, and then also kind of destroys the environment, the like school environment.
Is that something that they picked up on cameras?
I don't really know, because I know it's been happening a lot in bathrooms, and they can't have cameras in the bathrooms
Right.
or in the bathrooms. And so we have like bathrooms that are like missing doors on stalls or something like that, or they'll be closed down for a while. And it's just like yeah. And I think they do catch them on camera, but I don't know what the like repercussions have been. Or at least I haven't really heard of any.
Yeah, and to co-sign that, Representative Villaflor, I think whenever the Deputy Mayor of Education was having his engagement here related to the boundary study, or I think that work, I raised that about like some of the areas that have like either you have high usage or you have high instances of that. For instance, I will take the school across the street from my house. The community likes to cut through their yard kind of area, and they end up breaking this gate to access that passageway, which ends up being a what is it, a safety issue for our students. Or another school that I had that, you know, there was a safety issue in the area, and like it took a while to respond to like, you know, fixing some remnants of a shooting on a building. And I was asking him, like, we know, unfortunately, like, you know, certain areas of our city just have high instances of just certain things based on community need. And could there be like either a pot of funds or designated team for DGS or some quick response to being able to remedy those issues, so that, you know, students aren't paying for like community issues, or, you know, paying the price for community issues. You know, so I was asked similar thing, like, you know, when those instances of vandalism happen, or, you know, that the community is using like a basketball court, that was probably a more positive example. At one of my schools, you know, the basketball court is accessible during the what is it called, in the weekend, and, you know, the hoop becomes broken. Well, the students come back on on Monday, and they don't have a hoop anymore, or the playground is now unsafe and they, you know, are restricted to just playing in a certain area. I think that hoop has been fixed, but I hope it's not broken again, you know, because that was just from the walkthrough this summer. So I'm just like, how do we, you know, make sure students don't have to pay for, like, okay, community broke the hoop, like, how can we just get another hoop by Monday? Or okay, maybe just the playground is down for a week versus being down for months. Or I had one school that had like a rail that was broken and it never just got fixed until a grandparent reached out, and they just kept like a yellow tape, like almost a police tape. You know, it's like, well, do you want to walk to elementary school in the morning with a police tape that's not really for a police scene, but it's for a broken rail that could have been fixed? So those kind of things I wish we could dedicate just for those, you know. I know some parts got to get, you know, ordered, but we also know we have certain just high areas of usage and need that it's just like the equity in it is, let's get these repaired for these students to give them, you know, a better experience and not feel like my school is always broken.
Thanks, Representative Reed. That's important. Any other facilities issues? All right, moving us along to chronic absenteeism. I do think I would name the crosswalk there and following up with the crosswalk. I also think, and included in that is the bills that are being proposed through the council. I think, the thing that I would add is the task force recommendations that should be coming out in June. So the Everyday Counts task force recommendations. And the thing that I've been trying to push for in those meetings is just not just thinking about this from like a top-down approach as a city with regards to OSSI or DCPS or other things, but thinking about how do we engage local school communities, you know, and from a more grassroots perspective, so that we are better understanding the barriers as to why students and families, you know, aren't coming to school. So just my 2 cents there, and we can think about how we approach this work as a committee throughout our conversation today. But do other subtopics come up for other members in thinking about the issue of chronic absenteeism?
I'd just like to mention, since Representative Goulet is here, that we talked about that on the school's safety thing too, about the fact that there really isn't, we have no idea what the plan is to make sure that when schools open, that there's a plan about taking care of absenteeism right away.
Yeah, thank you for filling me in on that. I got called away again to deal with this issue. The for me, I think what would be most helpful on the chronic absenteeism, Representative O'Leary, and Representative Williams, would be, as we look at this as a city, is if each agency can kind of figure out what its role in the overall solution is. I know DCPS is working through a number of issues that were raised in the oversight hearing. You know, council's going to have continuous hearings on this, but within our role of, you know, providing, you know, basic OSSE oversight, but then also, you know, curriculum issues, you know, kind of how do we play into this? And I think that's where this committee can be really useful, is we can maybe find, you know, what our part of the solution is, and then really try to get that done, because it's an area that kind of should fit within what the state board does. We don't have a lot of powers here, but we do have the ability to influence curriculum. So I think that could be something that's really important.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just to note that the Everyday Counts Task Force is partly part of the conversation has been on clarifying roles and responsibilities of different city agencies. So that's one part of the work that's already started, that we can continue as well. And then thinking about where we reside on as state board members. Any final thoughts here before I move us on to our last? All right, so in terms of opportunities for learning, the one thing that I feel like is really important, that I'd be open, and I don't know how urgent it is, but I think definitely important is to do, I guess we're using this language of crosswalk, so that's what I'll say is like a crosswalk of our, what's it called? The like CTE, or like career and technical education, to see and make sure that families know that if they want a non-traditional path, like what opportunities exist throughout the district. You know, there, and as students particularly are applying for high school, you know, if they're interested in a particular trade, that they know what opportunities exist. I know there is a document in DCPS that already has that information. But there are also charter schools that have programs that you know, some people just don't know about. So that would be one thing that I would want to make clear and more accessible for district families and students.
I agree completely. There's no communication unless you just happen to find out about something. It's like the new centers that are being opened. We already have one, and there's another one being opened, right? And the parents don't know about that. They don't publicize it. It's got to be on the sides of buses. It's got to be at places. I don't know what's happening. That, you know, they have the enrollment fairs this weekend at all the schools are supposed to have an enrollment fair in DCPS this weekend. But I doubt if they have any kind of a flyer or anything where parents can find out. Because if a school doesn't offer a course, then you could take that course at another school. I don't think parents know that.
And then if we, like, we're not even at the place of awareness of that, so then it's hard to create partnerships. I mean, I think dual enrollment is part of this, just knowing like what schools have partnerships with dual enrollment, what dual enrollment programs kids are supported with. There's like, this is a big piece that's missing in terms of like how we take stock of educational opportunities in the city.
It's just like AP, right? I mean, I offered AP to anyone who wanted to take it. We were one of the few schools in the city that did that. You know, it was very, very privileged in other schools. and it still is.
Other areas that, I mean, we have a robust list already, but are there other areas that come to mind for folks in this broader category of opportunities for learning? All right. Well, we can circle back to things and obviously be fluid with as ideas come up, figure out how we want to tackle them. I do want to respect our time and try to get us out of here by 5, so I'm going to keep us moving. But just take a note of what we've generated here because we're going to try to think about our top 2 issues in just a couple slides. So moving forward to, how we can move together, these slides were sent by Darren, and I just want to quickly kind of review, because as we think about our work plan moving forward, we want to be action oriented and thinking about the impact we're intending. So there's a research category here where we could, issue reports, surveys, and memos. There's a relationship building that we could take an approach with other stakeholders, and those could be other agencies or education partners. We could take an advocacy approach, and you see the list of topics that are listed there. And then also particularly try to impact policy, which, we have on our agenda with regards to the truancy things that are coming up. So this is just a resource in how we strategize with moving some of the work forward. We'll reference this in just a second once we have some suggestions for topics that we're going to focus on. So moving into the next part around work planning, as I said, we're going to try to identify 2 topics and projects. For those members who were at the recent retreat, we talked about the project management framework of MOCA, where we're not going to create our MOCA today, but we will use that format to think about who's going to own the work, who's going to manage the work, what type of partners we need in the work to be able to weigh in. But given some of the suggestions that have already been thrown out, right, we have an attendance challenge throughout the city that needs to be addressed in particular timeframes, and thinking about the start of the school year for the upcoming school year. But then also what type of resolutions or smaller projects are needed along the way. So I'm not going to go through the particular work plan, but Darren, on the next slide, we have an example work plan, which everyone will be shared on. And I am also completely open, and we've talked about this previously, about how we simplify this and make it more user-friendly. So as ideas come up for how we do that, please share those with me and Darren. And I have met to think about how we can make this clearer and simpler. But we will be starting to create a work plan based on the ideas and topic areas that we decide on next. So,
Oh,
yeah,
I'm
Darren, want to jump in?
Yeah, just really quickly. So far what we have in terms of feedback from the chairs and from members and staff is to get rid of these columns of like each month and the X's. Instead, just simplify this where it's just quick milestones. So it's like have the research, like start research, and there would be a start and end date for whatever milestone that looks like. Panels, anything that goes along with one project, it should have about 4 or 5 milestones, not like a crazy list like this. So there will be an additional column of a start date and an end date, its status, and then there would be links to the MOCA for the milestones. So for example, if we're doing a survey, which member would be responsible for what, if that makes sense. So this the work plan will not look like this. And this is just showing what we're moving away from. As
Thanks.
you mentioned, Ben.
I've got an idea. Can we go back to the 5 things on that slide?
You're talking about the
Oh,
proposed
yes.
topic.
Yeah, the topic areas.
Mhm.
To me, we should choose 2 and work on them for a semester, especially the ones that are closely aligned with the beginning of school and the first weeks of school, first months of school. And then use the semester timeline for just 2 projects, and then have 2 different projects the second semester. Just an idea. Because I know that,
Spoken like a true professor, Representative O'Leary.
huh?
I said spoken like a professor.
No, I'm just thinking about, school safety and chronic absenteeism are 2 things that if they're not addressed and taken care of, just you can plan for a chaotic school year. And I'm just thinking that even though we don't have any power, we do have a voice. And we need to push that all summer long so that the school systems are proactive about what they're doing at the beginning of the school year. Because it's just like all teachers know, that if they don't have hold of their class the first couple of weeks of school, they've lost that class for the whole year. You can't get it back.
Yeah, so that takes us directly into the next phase, and we can think about the timeline and topics of that.
Okay.
So I want everyone to weigh in here, but I'll also underscore initially, let's do it kind of one at a time. I want to underscore the chronic absenteeism piece. I think that our rates as a city are higher than even a lot of comparable urban districts. And like, if kids aren't in school, they're not learning. So we're gonna have way more challenges as a city. And what that looks like, I think there's a robust conversation to be had there, but that would be one topic that I would want us to focus on. How do others feel about our committee prioritizing that issue?
I agree completely. And I think that the school safety should be project number 2.
I completely agree with Representative O'Leary's order there. And I think what you said, Representative O'Leary, about making sure both were done before the start of school, I think is important, or at least that we have a handle on it before then. So like for the next 6 months, I could see those being the 2 projects that we focus on.
Yep.
Can you repeat the first one? It kind of went, my
Yeah,
sound went.
absenteeism and truancy. Or we can just say chronic absenteeism too. Because that's what the phrase that we're measuring. Representative Reed and Villaflor, how do you feel about one or both of those topics?
I feel good about both of those.
Yeah. I'm good, and particularly chronic absenteeism, a step to be like identifying what are gonna be like the action items or like actual like techniques put in place at the start of the school year. And let's collect data on that instead of collecting data on all these bills and
Yeah.
reports.
Great. All right. So
The whole thing, and I brought this, Carleen knows because she's been hearing me longer than the rest of you all have. It doesn't take a college degree to figure out how many students there are in school the first week of school.
No.
But they don't, but it's like, no, it's a secret. We don't want to talk about that yet. And they lose the kids right away.
Right. So to just keep us focused here on identifying milestones and backwards planning, we're not going to go into a complete rundown of what our goals are for each of these projects right now, but I would like to spend just 2 minutes per project brainstorming things that feel important, and then I can share these out at the working session and we can follow up on them in our next meeting. So let's start with chronic absenteeism. What are things that feel important about the milestones or what the work should look like for our committee?
We need the data from week 1 of last school year.
Okay, so data, I think there's one thing around data transparency. I think there's another thing around how regularly the data is reported.
Right.
Uh, and then I think what the plan is for the reporting for the upcoming school year as well, because that has not been done in a way that allows schools to respond to those challenges in real time. We get the data too late, and then it's like, is that even the same situation?
Yep.
Other things that come up to potentially focus on with regards to absenteeism. I think for
Well-
me, I'll say, sorry, is to, I will update the committee and the board with regards to the recommendations from the task force and figuring out how we can make those recommendations actionable immediately. So I think we have the city's attention, we have the mayor's attention on this. And I think we need to make sure that we don't just, have recommendations without any action behind it.
Who's accountable?
I mean, ultimately, it would be the mayor, right? And us.
You would think. She's in charge of education.
Mhm.
But how does the information, but is she getting correct information? Teacher retention, she wasn't getting the correct information from anybody.
And I think that's why we have the data transparency number one there.
Yeah.
Any final things here with regards to trying to get chronic absenteeism that come up for anyone?
Well, I mean, what I would love to see on this is to understand what our role can be in it. I mean, I think councils is maybe oversight, and I think, ultimately the mayor is responsible for all of this as the head of schools. But, if we just say everything's on the mayor, then nothing's going to be like the people who really need to be doing these things aren't going to be held accountable. So hopefully, what comes of this citywide discussion on this is that everybody kind of identifies the role they can play in it. So I think, what should come from this is that we identify kind of what our role should be, both with oversight and then, maybe steps that we're going to take to initiate either research projects or to even we can initiate legislation. We could, initiate. We can't formally introduce it, but we could initiate the process of getting curriculum changes with OSSI. So I think just understanding what our role can be from this and then executing it is what's important to me.
Yeah, I'll underscore that. And Darren, if you could just add there for like identifying roles, like identifying and clarifying roles, because that has come up in both of the last everyday accounts task force meetings, Representative Goulet, where like if you don't know what your agency is responsible for, like you don't know what another agency is responsible for. So as you're communicating, you're not able to ask the right questions. And everyone's just kind of talking past each other rather than working with each other. So I think that's critically important. Moving us into safety, what are the project's milestones, important action items that come to mind? And just to remind folks, we have like a safe passage kind of crosswalk, or a safe passage, like issues around safe passage training, school discipline processes and procedures, as like the idea of understanding if we have a school psychologist at every school or how we can help support the pipeline. The thing that comes to mind for me too, I think just because it already has legislation behind it, is how are we going to implement the conflict resolution bill? I want to know what schools are actually doing there, because yes, it's important that we look at things as to how students are getting to and from school. And that's something we should definitely tackle, in my opinion, but also like something that schools have control over is what happens within their building. And I'd like to know how trainings are going to be done in the upcoming school year to support teachers and students in minimizing conflict.
Because that was the same thing that came up on this social emotional health uh, the bill that we didn't pass the other day or didn't vote for is because there's not a plan. There's not a school-based plan about how that's taken care of. I remember they said that, well, it's not going to be a class. It's not going to be, it's a standard, but it's not, all the other standards we've been talking about have actual plans where people are working on the things rather than just say, well, the teachers can do it because they see the kids every day kind of thing.
Right. So that, I think that makes sense, is like, clarifying school-based plans. Let's put that under the safety bucket. Because I think that's also a way that school, Darren, do you mind going, are you just gonna take this and move it to the other slide, or?
Yeah, I could do that, if that helps. I
Yeah,
could,
we don't need to recreate the wheel in that sense. We could just brainstorm one or two other things here, and then when we revisit it next time, we can do that. Or we could.
Representative Williams, if I can just add real quickly to that list, we focused on mental health for the list, but I think the other challenge that I think we just heard from students at the last meeting, the last State Board of Ed meeting, was physical health as well, with the nursing shortage we're experiencing at our schools.
Mhm.
And how that floating model, where nurses are having to move from school to school isn't really working for youth. I don't know that that's something that we can tackle at the state board level, but it's something that maybe fits into this overall package. I mean, I think with this category, I agree to its importance. I just struggle to figure out kind of what our role is in this. Whereas I think with truancy, I can see what our role is.
Right.
On this one, I mean, I don't see how those fit within us, except for maybe the conflict resolution, if it involves, changes to curriculum in some way. But this I fully support. I don't know what our task in this would be for helping the city.
Yeah, that's a good point to be mindful of, because I think once we define the role, then we can have a better idea as to what levers of action the committee can pursue. So, I'm mindful of time. Any final additions here, and we'll clarify this for the, once we start figuring out how to work on that project, but any, priority areas or milestones that come up for any other members around safety? The only other thing that comes up for me right now is just also based off of some of the testimony from some of the PAVE parents and leaders, is like, where do we where does the budget fall with regards to at the end of the day, once things are finalized with safe passage? With regards to funding, with regards to training, with regards to clarifying expectations and communication.
Yeah, just to add to what you said, Representative Williams, I thought they did a great job of articulating cost neutral ways that they could just improve synergy between the agencies at the last meeting. So maybe that could be something that we could facilitate as well. I realize we're probably not going to be able to get a lot more resources in this budget, for something like this. So, the fact that they said a lot of this could be done just by getting people back in person and speaking with each other was really great to hear. So I think maybe that's something that we could participate in, that process of trying to get everybody in the city talking to each other and understanding their roles. So
Yeah, I like that. It kind of situates us as the glue in that. But and that could be a way of defining our role in this work. So thanks for that, Representative Goulet. All right, so the last item on our agenda is just figuring out a time where we can meet. So we want to be mindful of the student representative school schedule, so nothing during the school day. That, and then also directly following public meetings allows for members to quickly debrief panels or public witness testimony. Keep monthly meetings to 1 hour and try to respect that 1 hour time. That is one thing that I'm generally good on, and having had a little more practice being a committee chair, something that I want to hold us to is if we need to meet for a half hour, 45 minutes, we'll be in and out, but I want to hold us to an hour when we do meet so that we come ready and are able to be efficient and effective together. One idea that I'll throw out here and people can respond to is having a meeting similar to now, like be the last week of the month, because that allows for us to like follow up on the public meeting, but also situates us before the working session. So if there are ideas that need to be moved or resolutions that need to be introduced, it allows us to talk about them and then situates us in just a week later where we can bring it up with the whole board at the working session. How do others feel about figuring out a day within the last week of each month to meet?
This works for me. Tuesdays, 4 o'clock.
I agree. I had something come up today that was unexpected, but typically this would be a great time.
Same.
Great.
Same. Yep.
Awesome. So let's keep that consistent then. I think the only thing I do, it won't conflict with the Memorial Day weekend, so we're good for May. So then we'll plan on May 28th, being our next meeting at 4 p.m. And hopefully we'll have some clarity around a variety of these projects for then. If things come up in the interim, feel free to email me, Darren, or feel free to just email the whole committee. I'm not trying to gatekeep any information with regards to generating ideas. So I think the more we stay in communication, the more we can move the work forward together.
Great.
Any final words or questions before we adjourn today? All right. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you for the public for tuning in. I'll see everyone at the working session next Wednesday.
All right.
Everyone.
Take care. Thank you all.